My name is Christina Schaefer, and my grandmother grew up in the stone home at 2145, and I remember going there from probably some of my earliest memories. We used to come down to Cincinnati almost every weekend from Dayton to go to church, and for a while, when I was very young, my great-grandfather was still living there, Rudolph Gump. And so we would stop in to see him, and Grandma took care of the flowers outside, and after Grandpa passed away, my Uncle Tim and my Aunt Mary Beth were building a house, and their family lived there for a while. And so I spent a lot of time growing up in that house, in that neighborhood, and just listening to the stories that Grandma would tell, listening to the stories that other family members would tell. I know my aunt mentioned the step in the house. I mean, that step, it's funny to have a step mean so much to somebody, but you just think about all the different people who have walked through that doorway over the years, because the house has been in our family for just so long. I have been doing some research on ancestry lately, just trying to look up trying to corroborate some of the stories that I heard as I was growing up. Things like, with Nicholas Schwab building the house and Margaret Langfritz and them getting married there and living there and growing, and just finding their names on the census and seeing the different stories that come through. It's just been a big part of my childhood, and the whole fact that our family history means so much to the entire family is just a huge gift that I know has been passed down through the generations. We know a lot. We know more than a lot of people do about their family history. We know that Nicholas Schwab came over from Germany, and so did Margaret Langfritz. Nicholas Schwab came from Baden, and she came from Bavaria, I believe. So we know about that side of the family back to where they came over. Lately I've been trying to figure out which ship they came over on, if we can possibly find that. I'm kind of hitting a wall there, but we do know on the Gump side of the family that they came over in the early 1890s. I believe it was 1885, I think. Not 1890s, I'm sorry. It's 1885. So they both came over the same year. It was Rose Noller and John or Johann Wenzel Gump. And they both came over the same year. They came over on two different ships. She came over in July. He came over in October. She came through Baltimore. He came through New York City. And so they eventually made it to Cincinnati, and they were married by 1890, I believe. But they had a bunch of children, and that house has just been passed down. They lived on Conroy Avenue, the Gumps did, and then they moved across the street in Queen City Avenue. There was a big red house across the street from the stone home, and their family lived there. And then eventually Grandpa Gump married my grandma Christine, who was living in the stone home. And so that's how we all made it. We're all able to be here. So just being able to dig into that history, finding people's occupations on the census records has been really interesting, because we've heard that it was a fruit farm. Well, we found that one of Grandpa Gump's brothers had a fruit peddling car, and then we found a family picture that actually has that car in it. So just being able to find all those little clues and putting them together and building that family story has been a huge gift for us. There was some things that I thought about too, that we do have some pictures of the property at 2145 before other things got built around it. It was actually very fertile farm soil. There was an orchard there for a long time. My great-grandfather, Rudolph Gump, was a fireman, but he was also a farmer. And so he grew lots of produce. They had the orchards there. We have a picture of my great-great-grandmother, Elizabeth, and on the back it says that, she was peddling fruit to Findlay Market from what they grew on Queen City Avenue. And I thought that was a really neat story. And that also kind of is where a lot of that produce that Robert Gump would sell in his fruit peddling cart. And then I also remember just growing up and hearing stories from Grandma about the La Rosas and the Garalias, and they were just such an integral part of that community at that time. And then my Uncle Chris noted that the demographics changed after a while. It went from a mostly German community to a primarily Italian community. And when I was looking at those census records, you can see, because it marks, where a lot of people were born. And so in 1 year, one census, it would be German, 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 German. And then you saw like Italian, Italian, Italian. And then our family was German. And then everyone else on the page was Italian. So you saw a huge shift there because of that. But there's just so many stories, and they just keep popping up as you talk about it. It's hard to, make sure you're including everything. But there's just so many rich stories from that area.
It was actually, for a long time, a lot of people referred to it as Little Italy in that area.